This is one of Australia's most important infrastructure sites, the Port of Melbourne. Millions of containers pass through here every year, more than anywhere else in the country, and that number is set to soar in the coming decades. But it's been facing some tricky challenges, and it's all to do with getting these big metal boxes full of crucial commodities in and out. To meet future demand and increase capacity, while also running fewer trucks to improve air quality, the port needed to make huge changes. It's why a massive program of work has just been carried out to fix both problems at once. From rearranging railways to tackling difficult ground conditions with state-of-the-art tech, this is how the team behind Australia's megaport upgrades kept everything on track. With the most skyscrapers, the largest stadium, and now the highest population, Melbourne has officially taken the title of Australia's biggest city. Sorry, Sydney. And yet there's one other part of it worthy of attention that no one really talks about, despite millions of people relying on it every day. It might not have a fancy sky bridge or the facilities to host a giant sporting event, but without it, this city, and indeed this country, would struggle to function as it does. We're talking about the Port of Melbourne, the largest in Australia for general cargo. Covering a huge area of land at the mouth of the Yarra River, it consists of several man-made docks that have been operating since the late 1800s. These include the giant Victoria, Appleton, Webb and Swanson docks. Today, over a third of the shipping containers that pass in and out of this country come through this port. In fact, it handles over 3.2 million of these 20-foot-long units filled with essential goods every year. If you were to line that many containers up end to end, it would reach halfway around the Earth. As for what they contain, when we say essential goods, well, we really do mean essential goods. Inside these big colourful boxes are things like vehicles, appliances, furniture, and most importantly of all, coffee and beer. Thanks to all this thirst-quenching trade, the port now contributes more than 11 billion Australian dollars to the country's economy every year. That's about 7.5 billion US dollars. Of course, none of this works without transportation, and we're not just talking about the big ships that carry containers overseas. There's also a vast system of road and rail infrastructure to get them onto their eventual destinations over the land. And that requires a whole lot of trucks and freight trains. But there's a problem. Well, several problems actually. Firstly, the port is heading for major growth. Container volumes are set to double by 2050. Now, ideally, most of that extra cargo is going to be distributed via rail because trains can shift more containers and it's better for the environment. But there's an issue with capacity. Limitations on the existing infrastructure have made it difficult to get enough trains coming and going, so most goods have to go by road. Which brings us on to the second issue, the trucks that have had to do most of the heavy lifting. Now, because they can only take 2 or 3 containers each, there's a lot of them driving around at all times. And that's adding strain to the already congested road network. Air pollution and congestion in the inner western suburbs has gotten so bad that one council had to declare a health emergency.
There's only so much traffic that the road network can handle, and so we need to find other ways to get the containers in and out of the port environment. And Melbourne's in a quite unique position as well, that we're a city port. A lot of the other ports around the world and in Australia aren't necessarily located in the very middle of your metropolis.
So they decided something had to be done to shift the balance away from road and towards rail. And it would need to happen in Swanson Dock, which has an international container terminal and is surrounded by existing train tracks. Until recently, there were 4 intermodal terminals combining both road and rail, along with more than 10 kilometres of dual-gauge track. Now, we know what you're thinking. Why dual-gauge? And perhaps more accurately, what does dual-gauge even mean? Well, Australia is one of the only places in the world that has tracks of different gauges, or width, across a large network within the same country. Therefore, the port needs to have the infrastructure to accommodate trains that run on each type of track across long distances. The system that serves the port covers 3 states, and that's a lot of land in this part of the world. As well as Victoria, where Melbourne is the state capital, the network reaches all the way to New South Wales and South Australia, terminating at Sydney and Adelaide. The trouble is, the terminals back at ports won't be able to get rail deliveries in and out quick enough in the future, and there's a lack of space for bigger trains.
So as we get towards 6 million containers, that's going to pose quite a few problems for capacity throughout the entire port. So a lot of work needs to be put in over the next 20, 30 years on realigning the way that the port currently operates. And one of the key areas for that is increasing the amount of containers that are imported and exported out of the port area on rail.
You see, whereas trucks can only carry an average of 2.8 containers each, a 600-metre long train can carry 84 containers in one go. But there's been nowhere on Swanson Dock to put them, and because there was no way to directly transfer containers from sea to rail, they had to go onto trucks and be carried to the trains before they could then continue their journey. But a solution to this puzzle came in the form of this, the Port Rail Transformation Project. It's a highly complex scheme of works that was completed earlier in 2024 and took around 2 years. Encompassing an area of 82,000 square metres, it called for an additional rail terminal to be constructed, along with improvements to the existing rail and road networks. This ensured better connectivity across both modes of transport. To make the base for the new Swanson Dock East rail terminal, 36,000 tonnes of paving material was broken up, refined and relaid as part of the new surface. It meant digging through several layers of ground that had been constructed over centuries.
Because the site had been used multiple times and sort of pavements built on top of pavements, and you had things like asphalt, interlocked pavers, concrete slabs, all sorts of stuff throughout the substrate. And so we were actually able to take a lot of those previous layers of development away and then put them back onto the site and form the sub-bases of the new pavements we constructed.
Around 30% of all the material excavated for the project was reused, drastically reducing the amount of contaminated waste being sent to landfill. Yes, you heard that right. With the site having such a long history of industrial use, there were concerns about the presence of chemicals and other nasty substances below the surface. Particularly when another nearby project, the Westgate Tunnel, has faced big problems with soil contamination. Fortunately, after some early preparations, the levels found here were a lot easier to handle.
There was a lot of work put in up front with investigative boreholes and everything to determine the levels of contamination across the site, which luckily weren't too much of a concern. And especially at the time, there was a lot of media around things like PFAS in the soil. And so there was a lot of concern that we'd have high levels of that given the sort of industrialised environment and previous chemicals used for firefighting and that sort of stuff in the area. But luckily, the results came back that was all within a sort of manageable level.
The next challenge was to construct a pair of extra long sidings at the new terminal for those bigger trains. Now, if you're not familiar with the rail lingo, a siding is a short section of track away from a main line, usually for storing, loading and unloading trains. Each one was constructed from around 4,000 cubic metres of concrete and a whole lot of steel rebar for reinforcement. Another key part was an interface between the new rail yard and the International Container Terminal, creating a direct link between ships and trains. Finally, a new rail connection was built between two of the main docks, and a road was installed to replace one that had to be moved to make way for the works. Now, all of this had to be done without disrupting the daily activities that keep this place running like a well-oiled machine. Oh, and there was a whole load of other obstacles in place too, including underground cables and drainage systems. There was a lot to be done and not a great deal of time to plan it. WSP was brought in as design consultant for the project, teaming up with contractor Seymour White Construction. Given 12 weeks to submit all the design documents and 6 weeks to produce the first results, time was of the essence. The team had to find a way for the more than 250 people on the project to collaborate as closely as possible. With it, they could manage vast amounts of information, streamline their workflows, and provide real-time access to the data and digital models all in one place. They achieved this by investing in a system based on the iTwin platform and ProjectWise software from Bentley Systems. It enabled them to create a connected data environment that proved critical to meeting project milestones.
Given the tight time frame, we had to get everything right, and we couldn't afford to have rework or conflicting designs or I guess uncoordinated designs as well. So this is where that single source of truth connected environment really came into play.
Alex and his team could carry out visual design reviews on a regular basis and ensure issues were resolved quickly while keeping waste to a minimum and avoiding rework.
It had all of those key tools that we needed to do our coordination. So we could view the model, we could do clash detection in there, we could cut up the model, section it as we wanted. The way we were working is it was more agile in the sense that everyone knew what was happening and could be confident in what they were looking at any given time on the project.
So now the upgrade works have been finished and the port works towards getting the site fully operational, how does someone that played a crucial role in the scheme look back on it?
I feel extremely privileged to be able to work on a project from start to finish and take it all the way from a concept design through to reality, but also being able to sort of have such a tangible impact on the Victorian and Australian economy and deliver assets that will be used for the next 50, 100, 200 years is just an incredible feeling.
The Port of Melbourne has evolved massively over the past couple of hundred years, and without this immense project, it would have struggled to take its crucial next step. But thanks to these amazing teams, this epicentre of trade is not just primed for more expansion. The benefits of their work will soon be delivered far and wide. This video was sponsored by Bentley Systems. You can learn more about that at the link below. Don't forget that we're inspiring the next generation of builders through our investment into Brickborrow, a fantastic LEGO subscription service. You can learn more and get started today over at brickborrow.com. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.